Welcome back. We are back in our original project that we've been working on throughout the lessons. What I want to show you today is a brand new concept, and maybe a brand new concept to you altogether. And it is the concept of events. Events are an invaluable tool in Laravel, and you're going to end up reaching for them quite often. Think of an event as exactly what it is. Something happened. When something happens, an event has occurred, and at that point, you'll have a list of things for your application to respond with. The classic example of this would be a brand new user registering to your app. When they do that, you more than likely are going to send them a welcome email. And then you may need to subscribe them to your newsletter. And on top of that, you may want to get a Slack notification saying, hey, there is a new subscriber to your app. So all of this can be done at the controller level. And we're going to start off by doing that, and then we're going to refactor it to an event. And that's really the place where it belongs. So before we get started, let's head back to the terminal, and I'm going to get our development server booted up again. So PHP Artisan serve, and there we are. Let's visit the page. All right, so we are here. So here's what I'm thinking. We have a full customer list controller working already. So my first idea would be, if we added a new customer, I want to send them a welcome email. Pretty simple, but pretty common thing you need to do in a lot of applications. Let's head back to PHP Storm, and let's pull up the customer controller. There we go. And of course, we know that that's going to happen whenever we call the store method. And this is the beauty of using RESTful controllers. Everything always falls in the same place. We show them the form during the create, and then we hit that store method to actually be able to store our customer. All right, let's start a new line here. Now, we already talked about mailables, and I'm just going to do it very quickly. It is more of a review. If you're not familiar with mailables, there's a whole lesson on how to actually send email in Laravel. So check that out before you move on. So let's go ahead and make a new mailable now. I'm going to switch over to a different tab, and I'll say PHP Artisan, make mail, welcome new user mail, and we'll say that this is going to be a markdown, and we'll put that under emails dot new welcome for now. All right, head back over to PHP Storm. Let's check out new welcome. I'm going to keep this extremely simple. I'm just going to have welcome new user. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. All right, so we know that in our controller, we are creating a brand new customer, and then we're going to send them that welcome email. Now, the create method will actually return us the new model. So I'm going to save that to a variable because I'm going to need their email. And let's go ahead and do mail, and that's illuminate support facades mail. Notice I am importing it here at the top. It's right here. You got to add that. Otherwise, you're going to get a mail not found exception. And that's going to be to, and we're going to send it to customer email. And we're going to send a new welcome new user mail. Okay? Then we said something like we want our user to be registered to our newsletter. We're going to fake that one. So I'm just going to do some pseudocode here. Register to newsletter. And there's obviously some real logic that you would put here. I'm just going to dump registered to newsletter. And then the last example that I gave you was that we wanted to send a Slack notification to the admin. And I'll just say dump Slack message here. So we have 3 distinct steps, right? We are sending an email, then we'll go ahead and register them to the newsletter, and then we're going to send a Slack notification, and then finally we are going to redirect. Now, if I run this right now, we're going to end up going back to customers, and we're not going to get to see these 2 steps right here. Just for demonstration purposes, I am going to just disable that return. So that way we actually get to see those events happening. So I will just comment out that for right now. Again, I'm only doing this for demonstration purposes. Otherwise, we would never get to see these messages. All right, so let's see what that looks like in the browser. Let's add a new customer, new user, test, add customer. And sure enough, we get registered to newsletter, Slack message here. And let me go ahead and pull open Mailtrap. That should still be set up for us. So in Mailtrap, we have welcome new user. Awesome. So all 3 events occurred when we registered a user. And this is typical of a new user getting registered to your site. There's definitely going to be a number of things that you need to do, but you definitely don't want your user to have to wait to do all of these things. And of course, we're going to end up talking about queues at some point, but this is more about organizing your code properly. So let's take a look at the event option to see how we can refactor this right now. So when a new customer is registered, what I'd really like to do is just have a single line here of event new, and then we'll say new customer has registered. And that's it. And then the rest of these lines, I want those out of my controller. Like I always mentioned before, I want the controllers to be as clean as possible. You don't want your controllers to have a bunch of methods and a bunch of lines in them. The controller is the 30,000 foot overview of your application, not the nitty-gritty stuff. The nitty-gritty stuff does not belong in your controller. So now we raise this event, which is basically announcing that a new customer has registered. And then if anybody cares, you need to do what you need to do based on the fact that that event happened. And that's the way it works. Now that side effect stuff, those are called listeners. And that makes sense. They're out there listening for a specific event to occur. And when it happens, they respond in a certain way. Fair enough? So how do we create these? So the first way I'm going to show you is the manual way, where you create your listeners and your events separately. And then I'll show you a very cool trick to do it all in one command. It's pretty awesome. So let's head back over to the terminal and run PHP Artisan. As always, let's check out the command first. So make event, and we have make listener. Two different things that we need to do. Remember, the event is simply what actually gets called. Hey, there's a new customer. That's it. That's the only thing the event needs to do. Then you're going to make a listener for each of the subsequent actions. So in our case, let's get back to PHP Storm, we have step 1, step 2, and step 3, if you wanted to think of them as steps. So we have one event and 3 listeners that we need to make. Let's make one event. PHP Artisan make event. And I decided to call it new customer has registered. And I will actually add event to the end of that. So we'll say new customer has registered event. All right, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to head on over and I'm going to run the command PHP Artisan make event. And then the name of the event is going to be new customer has registered event. All right, let's get that created. Head back to PHP Storm and let's dive through the directory so you can see what happens. Now here in the app, now we have this events directory. And inside events, we have the new customer has registered event. Okay, inside this event, you can accept any number of things. For example, most of the time to the event, you're going to pass any relevant data. So if you wanted to pass in the customer, let's go ahead and copy the customer. And you could pass that in right here, right into the event. And then in our event, we can accept that customer, and then we can actually initiate those fields and get them set properly. PHP Storm did it for me, but we added this line right here, private customer, and then we're accepting the customer here, and we're assigning that variable customer to this customer. So one nifty trick about events is that this customer variable here, if you make this public, you actually can access it right in your listener. And that's very powerful. So I'm going to change this over to public customer. And that way we're going to have access to it. And I'll show you how we're actually going to use it once we get our listener. Let me go ahead and erase this. Just clean up this class a little bit. All right. And there we are. There is our event. All right. So when a new customer registers, we're going to fire an event and say, hey, new customer has registered. And here's the customer. So like I said before, you make your event and then we need to make a listener for each of the steps. Let's make a listener now. PHP Artisan make listener. And what is the first step? Well, the first step is we need to welcome our new customer. All right. So welcome new customer. So the full class name will be welcome new customer listener. All right. Let's make that now. Head on back. And now we have a new directory altogether here, listeners. So let's welcome our new customer. And really all I have to do is grab this right here. I'm going to cut it out and I will bring it into my listener right in the handle method. Now mail class does need to be imported. So I'll import now and that's being imported here at the top, right here. And let's clean everything up a little bit. We don't need a constructor. We need to import the welcome new user email as well. And that's what the class looks like. Now, customer. How do we access customer? Well, the handle method receives the event. So we can say event arrow customer arrow email. Okay? So when we get the event, we can directly access that property right from the event. So that's how we have access to the email, so we can send to our user. Now, we need to hook all of this up, right? So right now, we have individual events and individual listeners, and nothing is really talking to each other yet. You need to create that connection. So that connection is made inside an event service provider. We haven't touched on service provider. This is actually the first time we've ever touched in service providers. But just know that a service provider, at the very core of it, all it is just a way for us to connect functionality in our app. That's the very simple of it. We're going to dive deep through that later on, so don't worry too much about it. To find the service provider, that's going to be inside the providers folder, and there's this event service provider right here. In event service provider, there is this array right here, and this array is a listener's mapping for our application. Basically, what we need to do is we need to connect our event with each of the listeners. Remember, we're going to have 3 listeners eventually, but we only have 1 event. So let's add our event now. So our event is new customer has registered event. Okay? And then we have 1 listener, so we'll put that here. And our listener is welcome new user listener, or welcome new customer listener. Okay, so now we know when a new customer has registered event occurs, we need to also run the welcome new customer listener. And that's it. Now they are connected. All right, let's check our work. And all I really need to do is just refresh this page here. Now notice here, I only have 1 email. If we did everything correct, then of course, I'll have a second email. So I'm going to hit refresh. It's going to say, do you want to do this action again? I'll say yes. Go ahead. And it looks like we forgot to import a class somewhere. New customer has shared event in the controller. All right, let's go back to customer controller. And it's not working because I created this before I actually created the event. So all we need to do is import that class. And that gets imported right here, right at the top. If you ever see a notification like this, just check if you imported the class. Now, a lot of times in the video, it's not really clear when that happens because PHP Storm kind of does it automatically for me. But again, if you ever don't find a class, just make sure that you are importing the class at the top with the proper namespace. All right, let's try that one more time. I'm going to hit refresh. Okay, so this time it works. And let's check out our new email. So we see here that we have our new email. So that's still being sent. Now remember that I told you I was going to show you 2 ways, a manual way and a more automatic way of actually registering listeners and events. And here's the more automatic way. So you can come to the event service provider and just give it the classes that you want to make. So I'll show you how that works. So we have our first welcome email, and then the next step for a customer is to register them to newsletter, and the third step is that Slack message. All right, so let's say register customer to newsletter and notify admin via Slack. So those are 2 brand new listeners that we don't have yet. So this automatic way will actually generate them for us. However, we do have to give it the full namespace in order for it to work properly. So I'll do that now. I will add that in, and just to keep it uniform, I'm going to add it to the first one as well, and then just stop importing it here at the top. So that way it's all clean and ready. So there you are. This is our event service provider now. Let's go back to the terminal and now take a look at PHP Artisan. So PHP Artisan has another command here called event generate. An event generate will actually look at that event service provider and generate any of these classes that it doesn't find. All right, let's run that now. PHP Artisan event generate. All right, let's head back. And sure enough, now we have 3 listeners, not just the 1. Now, just as a quick note, we did create these first 2 manually, but you can make it from scratch. You can start from the very beginning and generate exactly what you want, including the event and any listeners right away from the very beginning. So let's go ahead and distribute our code now. Notify admin via Slack. Let's clean this up a little bit. And I'm just going to bring this dump over. All right, let me delete that. Paste. All right, so our notify admin via Slack, all it's going to do for now is just dump some code. All right, let me close that up. Now register customer to newsletter. All right, let's head back to my controller and let's register our user. And we can clean this up by deleting all of that. Head back. Again, we can get rid of the constructor for now. We don't need that. Paste that in. Hit save. And let's take a look at our controller now. I'm going to uncomment that line just so we see the full controller. So we have 3 lines. When we originally started our lesson, we had 2 lines, and now we have 3 lines. And that is very, very clean. This is the proper way of doing this. If tomorrow, for some odd reason, we decided that one of those steps is no longer necessary, or you need to change a step, you only go and change that particular listener. And that's the beauty of it. All right, so let's run this code and let's make sure that everything is still running for us. I will go ahead and comment that line out one more time just so that we see what's actually going on. And let's head back here. I'm going to hit refresh. And of course, we still see our 2 lines and we have our email. So everything is working exactly the same way, except now we're raising an event and listeners are taking care of each of those steps for us. Now let's head back to event. Now I want to show you just a little bit of the power of this. Let's say that tomorrow you no longer want to register a customer to the newsletter. All you need to do is delete that line right there. We hit save. Let's head back, hit refresh. And now the steps have changed. Now we're sending an email. There's our email and our Slack message got sent. We are no longer subscribing them to newsletters. And that is a very powerful way for you to have all of your code contained in one specific place. In this case, inside a listener, for you to be able to execute that code when you need it. And if tomorrow you no longer need it, all you need to do is remove that line. You can delete your classes if you don't need them anymore, and you're good to go. The other thing is reusability. If you have a similar event where maybe you can manually register a new customer, for example, all you have to do is add an event and go ahead and use the same listener. There's no rules against using the same listeners for 2 or 3 or as many events as you have. So if welcoming a new customer is something that you do in several places in your application, you only need the one listener, as long as obviously the same email is being sent. So that is events. Now we're starting to get a little bit deeper into Laravel and things are getting a little tough, but hang in there. Continue to watch the lessons over and over, follow with the project, and you'll see over time how all of this stuff starts to really make sense. On a very, very last note, right now we are running this class and all of these events are just running right away. But we're going to talk about queuing, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to defer these listeners for later on. We're going to let our application take care of those off to the side, not blocking the user. Because if right now, for example, in my notify admin via Slack, if I just said sleep, hit save, come back, hit refresh, continue, nothing's happening, right? Everything is running in line. And something like resizing an image, for example, such as a profile, say that there was a profile image that you needed to resize. It may take a little bit of time to upload and then to resize and all of that. And basically the user is just going to be waiting the same exact time that we are waiting right now. I'm going to actually X this out because that's going to go on for a really long time. So that's a bit of a cliffhanger, right? We want to be able to handle these events off to the side. And once we start talking about queues, that's how that works. But for right now, I want to show you one last little thing, and that's inside the .env file. Let's take a look at our queue connection. Right now is set to sync, and sync basically means do everything in sync. As soon as I hit the button, everything's going to run all one after the other. But that's not typically how you run. So just keep that in mind. This is another one of those very advanced concepts, but we're going to handle those, and I'm going to show you how to deploy that using Forge and how easy it is to actually have queues in your application. So with all of that, if you have any questions, as always, leave them down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, share the videos, help spread the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next lesson.